Hi, in today's video, we're going to make some Azorean Fresh Cheese. I was in the Azores last year and cows were everywhere. I'm telling you, if you had to be reincarnated as a cow, you would want to live your life on the Azores. Beautiful green pastures. The Azores make about 15 to 20% of the total cheese production for all of Portugal. And there's a lot of small farmers there too. So it's an area where there's still a lot of family farms that bring their milk to the local dairy to be manufactured into cheese and other dairy products. It's just a beautiful scene driving across the islands and seeing these herds of dairy cows grazing on the green grass. The Azores were discovered in the 1400s, and Prince Henry the Navigator in about 1444 ordered that a lot of cows be left on each of the islands to see how they would do. And years later, when they came back, cows were flourishing everywhere. And it's just such a big part of the Azorean culture. So obviously, that many cows, you're going to have a lot of dairy products, cheese being one of them. So to begin with, a couple things of cheese making. Having a thermometer is really helpful because there's some temperatures you're trying to stay in that range. If you bring the cheese to too high of a temperature, there's a good chance that you're going to denature some of the proteins. Also, calcium chloride in the milk is very important, and that becomes unstable at high temperature. So you don't want to take your cheese much above like 105, but you do want to bring it up to temperature because the rennet, the enzyme that they get from the chamber of the cow's stomach, is more effective at a warmer temperature. So let's begin. We'll pour our whole milk into the pot. I'm using pasteurized milk, but not ultra pasteurized milk. Ultra pasteurized is heated too high and your milk will have a hard time coagulating for a few reasons. One, you kind of denature protein when you raise the temperature that high. And also, if you heat it too high, the calcium in the milk becomes less soluble and there's less calcium available to assist in the coagulation. In some cheese recipes, they'll actually add calcium chloride to the milk to help out with that coagulation. So I have the rennet here. And rennet is found in the stomach of cows, and it's thought that the rennet helps with coagulation of the milk while it's in the calf's stomach. And therefore, when the milk coagulates, it takes longer to go through the digestive tract. When it takes longer to go through the digestive tract, more nutrients are pulled out of the milk. So that is the reason they believe the rennet is in the stomach. There's also rennet tablets that you could purchase. It's great to have a thermometer. I'm already at my level. I'm at 103 degrees, so I turned off my fire. The other thing that's recommended is to dilute the rennet in 20 times the volume of water. So this recipe gets a 1/4 teaspoon of rennet. This is, you either could use bottled water that doesn't have chlorine, or you just could heat up some water, bring it to a boil, and that'll boil off any chlorine that's in the water. So I will mix in my 1/4 teaspoon of rennet. So mix that into the water, give it a stir. And the reason you don't want to use too much rennet is because it can leave a bitter taste. Salt affects the coagulation of milk a little bit, so I think that's why a lot of these recipes where they add salt in the beginning have a little more rennet than you typically see for a cheese recipe. You want to have about 0.75% salt, which is about 3 teaspoons of sea salt or about 5 teaspoons of kosher salt. The other thing that's important during cheese making is you always want to be clean and sanitary while cooking, but especially in cheese making, because anytime you have a lot of protein and a lot of moisture, it's a great environment for bacteria to grow. So definitely make sure your hands are really clean and your instruments are well washed. So I will add the diluted rennet. You just want to stir it for about a minute. It should take about an hour to an hour and a half for the rennet to solidify the milk. Now, because this is a fresh cheese and again very high in moisture content, it doesn't have a really long shelf life. So you're talking about 1 to 2 weeks. Make what you think you could consume within 2 weeks. Don't forget to check out justcookwithmichael.com. All the recipes are on there. You could search by Azores or Madeira or by the type of food, for example, pork or bread. And I do have the recipe for pimenta moída if you want to check it out. All right, it's been about an hour and a half. We're going to cut the curd. I cut it in about 1 inch to 2 inch cross hatches and then scoop it into my molds. And then we'll let the whey drain for about 3 days from the cheese. The first day you might need to pour it out a few times, and the second day, third day, maybe just once. Now I just have a slotted spoon. This will go in the refrigerator, and as this pan fills up with liquid, I will drain it off. You can buy cheese molds at the Portuguese website Portugalia that's based out of the East Coast. Or if you just want to give this a try, you could even do this in a small colander, like just do one big batch, like one big cheese in a small colander and let it drain out. Last night I emptied the whey from the tray, and you can see this morning there's probably about a half cup of whey in the tray. All right, this is 48 hours after I filled the molds. And again, last night the trays were empty, but this morning there's still about a half cup of whey in the tray. All right, it's been 72 hours, 3 days since I filled these molds. Last night this tray was empty of liquid, and on this third day there's still, I'm not sure if you could see that clearly, but there's still probably like, I would say 3 tablespoons of liquid. But I'm going to go ahead and unmold them now. It's not a really firm curd structure, and I believe the reason for that is because the salt in this recipe is added early. In some recipes, they'll add the rennet and then they'll let it solidify, and when they cut it, right before they scoop it into the molds, they'll sprinkle the salt all over the cheese, mix it in a little bit, and then put it in the molds. You could also use this homemade fresh cheese to make the famous queijadas Villa Franca from San Miguel Island. I have a recipe on my playlist, but if you go to the Azores, make sure you stop by their shop. It is absolutely delicious. All right, to unmold these, I'll just go with a knife around the edge. You could smooth out some of the bumps along the side that were created by the holes in the baskets. I think it just looks a little more appealing. Put a little pimenta moída on top, and you could serve this with your favorite crusty bread like a pop seco. Cut a little piece out. There we go. Now you can make fresh cheese at home. So thanks for joining me. Now go cook for someone you love.